Living Transplant is a podcast that takes you behind the scenes at the transplant program at Toronto General Hospital with the goal to educate, inspire, and fuel your passion about transplant. I'm your host, Candice Coghlan. I'm thrilled to have you join me for Season 5. In this episode of the Living Transplant podcast, I was joined by Jillian Best, the first organ transplant recipient and one in only 72 people to ever swim across Lake Ontario in all of recorded history. After Jillian received her liver transplant, while many of us were testing out sweatpant fashion and Zoom games to stay active during COVID, Jillian decided to train and swim and build her mental fortitude so she could swim across Lake Ontario in 18 hours and 36 minutes. She finished the 52-kilometer crossing to raise money for the transplant unit who saved her life and her mother's. We are later joined by Dr. Marie Faughnan, a lung specialist and HHT specialist at St. Michael's Hospital. As an avid cycler and physician, Dr. Marie was healthy and ready when a colleague of hers experienced liver failure and was in need of a life-saving liver transplant. She asked herself, why not me? She went through the process of going from a physician to a patient and became a living liver donor to save her colleague's life. Throughout this episode, we talk about perseverance, commitment, sacrifice, and doing hard things with extreme bravery. Please enjoy. Welcome back to the Living Transplant podcast. I am so thrilled to have Jillian Best with me today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So for those of our listeners who don't know you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jillian Best. I am a liver transplant recipient. I just had my 8th year anniversary on March 3rd. So my transplant was in 2016, and I live a pretty busy and full life right now. I live in London, Ontario. I work from home. I'm a hairstylist. I've been doing that for about 18 years. And I love to swim. It's a big part of my life and my lifestyle, and it's what keeps me strong mentally and physically.
Amazing. You mentioned that liver transplant, which we'll get into a little bit, but I'm wondering if you're comfortable about, if you can talk a little bit about your mom's journey and how that kind of brought you to know that you were going to be having to go down that same path.
So my mom, she became sick in 2000 and would have been 2002 or 2003. Her liver started to fail. We have a hereditary disease in our family. We call it HHT, which is hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. So it's a blood vessel malformation disease. So my mom required a liver transplant, which she received in 2004. And she was very, very sick. We thought we were gonna lose my mom, and she somehow pulled through in time for a liver that was suitable and a match to her that came available. So that was 2004, and it was around this time when the rest of the family got tested for HHT, and it was when I realized that I had the gene and I could possibly go down the same path as my mom. Wow. And so I was 15 years old at that time. So it was not really in my mind of like anytime soon. Like I didn't really worry about myself at that time.
Okay.
But my mom, she's had 2 transplants. So her second transplant was in 2016 as well.
Wow.
2 weeks apart from mine. So we've had quite a journey together. My mom was a great role model for me when I started to have experienced liver failure and the symptoms of that, which was only 7 years after her first transplant. So 2010 or so is when I started to feel sick.
And so you were in your early 20s when that started happening?
That's right. Yeah. I started having pain in my stomach. I thought it was my stomach. And it took us a while to figure out what it was, because we certainly didn't think that my liver would be affected at that young age.
Right.
So it took us a little bit of time. Took a hospital visit when I was in really extreme pain, and they did an ultrasound of my liver, and they said, "Oh, there's something not right here with your liver." And I remember my mom was with me at the time, and we just kind of looked at each other, and there was this moment of realization that I had started experiencing what she had. And I was only like 21 or 22 years old.
What did that feel like to be sitting in that chair with your mom and have that feeling of knowing what was to come?
It was really scary. There was a lot of unknowns. How fast is this going to progress? Um, Knowing that my mom had survived her first transplant was a good thing for me. It showed me that it was possible to get through it and survive, but I knew that it was not an easy way to live, being like experiencing liver failure and waiting for a transplant, because I saw my mom extremely ill, muscle atrophy, the ascites, not being able to work, not being able to really be there for myself or my sister. So her life kind of fell apart, and knowing that that could be something that I was going to experience was certainly a daunting thought. So I went to our specialist who's in Toronto, Dr. Marie Faughnan. She put me on an experimental medication, and that was an effort to uh, prolong the need for a liver transplant. And this drug worked really well for about 4 years. So I was able to regain some of my health back, and I did go back to work because I was out of work at that time because I was too sick. And it got me about 4 years of life through my 20s, which were not perfect. I experienced side effects from that medication, but it prolonged the need for the transplant until it didn't. And then the second kind of phase of my illness began.
How did that feel, and how did you work through that, knowing that you're now going down that same path that mom did?
Mm, it was a very heavy feeling, to know that that was what was going to have to happen for me to survive. Um, but as I said, my mom was such a good role model for me because she's such a strong woman, and I had seen her go through that and come out the other side and get her life back. And that was always, in my mind. And throughout the ups and downs of my illness, um, I always had my mom's support, and I always just wanted to be strong like her. So that really helped me through the moment where it was like setting in that I was going to need a transplant. Um, and I didn't really realize how much my life would change until after my transplant. It kind of like I knew it would be different, but I didn't realize how different my life would be and how my perspective would change. And I didn't realize that there was gifts in having a transplant until I'd had my transplant. I didn't think that there was positives to come from having a transplant. So as awful as it was at the time, there was always hope, and there has been some incredible things that have happened in my life since that I wouldn't want to change. So I'm just so grateful to have a second chance, and I can share that with my mom too, because she's also living the same reality.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that post-transplant life and what that recovery and that journey for you was like emotionally as well? I can hear it in your voice, the change that happened to you.
The biggest thing really was I wanted to come out of my transplant, a stronger person, and a better person in some way. I immediately felt like I needed to repay somebody or something, or in some way give back for having my transplant because I just felt like that was the right thing to do, and that's what felt right for me to move forward in my life. And so it wasn't too long after my transplant that I decided to get involved in promoting the cause, but really improve my health. The first thing that I wanted to do was compete at the World Transplant Games. That was something that gave me a lot of hope and inspired me to get back into a healthy lifestyle. And I was able to use the World Transplant Games and the sport that helped me recover from my transplant, which was swimming, as a way to promote the cause that saved my life. So that was the direction that I took things after my transplant. And yeah, like a lot, I don't even know where to start. There's a lot that changed. I guess maybe I'm waiting for a question.
Sure. Yeah. For people who don't know about the World Transplant Games, can you talk to me a little bit about that feeling of what are the World Transplant Games? And this year, it's pretty exciting. The Transplant Games are coming to Ottawa, which is kind of close to our home, right? It's not too far for us. But for somebody who's never been or never heard about the World Transplant Games, can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So the World Transplant Games is a sporting competition, and it provides a platform for people like me that have had a transplant to compete on an international stage. So the World Transplant Games are in a different place around the world every 2 years. And then on the off years, the Canadian Games, which are this year in Ottawa, as you mentioned. So you can swim, there's track and field, there's less intense sports like bowling, and I think there's darts and petanque and I think pickleball. Like there's all sorts of sports that people can compete in, and it ranges in competitive levels. So there's people that just want to participate and have fun, and then there's people like me that go there and want to um, set world records and bring home gold medals. The transplant games was what inspired me to get involved in the transplant community and take my health into my own hands and just really get my health back. And so I think when you go to the transplant games, and I can say my first experience was 2017. The games were in Spain, in Malaga, and it was an incredible experience. I met people of all ages. A lot of them were young, and that really struck me because around here, I feel like, or I often felt like I was the only young person that had a transplant. And that was certainly my first, something I noticed when I had my transplant and I was in the hospital, and it was all older people around me that were recovering. Going to the games and seeing all these young, healthy people that had had transplants, you'd never know. But you could share your experiences with other people. And you could relate with others, that you had this common bond. And so that was like a very special feeling to know that, you know, you're not alone, you're part of this community, and there's a lot of support out there. And not just for me, but my husband, who was with me through my entire illness and then through my transplant, he also got to meet and converse with the supporters of other recipients. And I think for him, that was really special because he felt like, oh, somebody else here understands what I went through. It
Right.
wasn't just from the patient's perspective or the recipient.
Mm-hmm.
Your supporter is going through a lot as well when you're down and needing a transplant. So anyway, the transplant games was really just a very positive experience, and I encourage anyone who's had a transplant to get involved. You don't have to be like a super athlete, but I just think it's a really great platform for recipients to get involved in and meet other people that have had similar obstacles.
Mm-hmm. You hit on something there that, I connect with so much about that. partner that is with you through that whole journey of your illness and post transplant. And they're just similarly, my husband and I had only dated for a year when I was diagnosed with kidney disease. And I'm sitting in a dialysis chair looking around the room, and the average age is probably 65, and I'm 24 at the time. And so the two of us going to dialysis, looking around, and you're thinking, am I the only one who is going through this at this age? And then post transplant, you're introduced to this whole world of young people who have been through something similar. And it's so empowering to know that there's other people out there. You can have this amazing community. And I'm hoping more people can have that before they have to go to the post transplant or go to the games to see this, so that there's more of a community throughout their journey. But
Yeah.
a lot of people assume once we're transplanted, we're cured and we're completely healthy. And
Yeah.
having that kind of journey as less of a caregiver now that we're transplanted, right? We're not on dialysis or medication, or we're not on life support, but we're still different than the average 30 something year old who, especially during our COVID times, all of that. So having
Yeah.
that experience as a partner, I'm sure for your partner as well, was quite different at that age.
Absolutely. Yep. I think it was. And yeah, what you said about people thinking your life just kind of goes back to the way it was. It's not, at least for me, it's not, that has not been the case. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in a bad way. It's
Right.
just life is different. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm a different person than I
Mm-hmm.
was before my transplant.
I'm wondering if you can bring me back to that moment at the transplant games where you started that passion for swimming and that impact on your health. And what was that realization for you that changed things or made that shift?
Well, there was sort of two moments. The first moment was actually before I went to the transplant games, when I went back to the pool the first time. And I remember standing on the deck, and I looked across the pool, and like the 25-meter pool just looked so far. Um and that was a really hard thing to get back in the water. I used to swim when I was a kid. So I swam until I was probably 15 years old, which was when my mom became ill the first time. And then I stopped. But getting back in the water and thinking, I want to compete at the transplant games. I want to do this. There was as hard as it was to get back into it and to start swimming, and the 25 meters feeling really hard and far. Um, I was so encouraged and excited to get better, because I had this opportunity that I had been longing for, which was to feel healthy and to feel capable and to put my energy into something positive. I hadn't had that in so long. So I think I was just, as hard as it was, I was so excited to keep swimming every day and get back into shape and to get stronger. And then fast forward like a year later, when I made it to the transplant games, there was, I mean, it wasn't just one specific person that kind of wowed me, but there is one person that I can mention who had a real positive impact on me. And she's from Great Britain, and she's in my age group. So we not now, she's actually the age group above, but we competed in the same age group. And she was just a phenomenal, first of all, she was a extremely friendly, like warm person. And even before we swam together at the games, she was asking me about my transplant and was just a super friendly competitor. And then I saw her completely dominate in our races. And I was so impressed and
Wow.
so inspired. And I have a competitive side to me. And she took the
Mm-hmm.
gold in the races that we swam in. I took silver, which was still incredibly
Mm-hmm.
exciting for me. Like, she motivated me to want to continue to get better and continue to keep swimming and become a better and faster swimmer. And that's what I worked on for the next 2 years before the next World Games, was like, I want to be like her. I want to be like I want to feel like that strong in the water, and just, and also like the fact that she was so friendly.
Mm.
I think that was really heartwarming. And I've seen it again at other transplant games since. She's just so welcoming to new people to the transplant games. And I just love that. I think it says a lot about her. And yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, an amazing thing to be able to set your sights on and think I'm going to get gold. I'm going to beat this amazing person, or I'm going to try, right? And have
Yeah.
that competitive spirit in you. That's amazing. And thinking about that competitive spirit in you,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm hoping we can chat a little bit about your incredible swim across Lake Ontario. I mean,
Sure.
it's remarkable that less than 75 people have successfully done that swim. And we're not talking about in the last 5 years. This is of all time. You're one of
Yeah.
those people who have done it. I have to ask, what prompted you to do
To do
that? It
that.
seems like a wild journey to go on.
It was, and it
Yeah,
was one of those things where like I knew going into it that it was going to be wild, but I didn't realize how wild until I was already in it.
right.
Which is probably a good thing because I don't know.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. It would have been harder to say yes to it knowing all the challenges that I was going to face. But so the World Transplant Games were supposed to happen in 2021, and 2020 came, and then very early on in the year, everything was sort of shut down, and they said the World Transplant Games in 21 are not happening. So I thought, well, I got to do something. Like I can't just sit around and wait for, I don't know, the world to go back to normal. I didn't know when that would be. It was very bleak at the beginning, as you know. The future was sort of like anything could happen. Uh, so I kind of coincided with a book I was reading, which is kind of funny because it's people are talking about it right now, but the Naiad uh,
Right.
movie. So I
Yeah.
happened to be reading her book at the time, which is called
Wow.
Find a Way. And it's essentially the story of the movie, which is for anyone who hasn't seen it, um, her quest to swim from Cuba to Florida, which is an incredible ocean crossing from 104 miles. So she started that in her 20s, I think, and she didn't actually successfully cross until she was 64, I believe. So that book completely inspired me to want to do a swim. And I decided, well, if I can't go to the transplant games and there's no pools open, I'm going to swim outside in the lake and I'm going to train to do a crossing of some kind. So I started doing research, and Lake Ontario was, I don't, I don't know initially know why that one appealed to me. I think because I knew it was challenging, but it had
Mhm.
been done before. So I knew it was possible.
Right.
Um, and, someone said, well, why don't you cross Lake Erie? It's like half the distance.
Mhm.
I just didn't feel like it was enough for me. I just felt
Amazing.
like that this spot is great, but like I really want to like go for it. I really want to challenge myself and do something that's gonna wow myself. Like I want to prove to myself that I can do this, but um I also knew that there weren't any transplant recipients that I could discover online that had done a lake crossing. So I thought I'm gonna like do this. So I did some research. I reached out to people that had done the crossing. I went on forums, like lots of open water reading, and I literally started to swim outside. And the lake was cold,
Mhm.
so I put on a wetsuit.
Yeah.
I didn't have like the best success when it was really cold. Like I could
Mhm.
only stay in the water about 20 minutes, even with a wetsuit on. And then I was like, this
This
isn't
isn't
really doing
nice.
anything.
Yeah.
Um, but once the lakes warmed up, I was out there swimming, and then I found a coach. So I mean, this story could be really long, but I'll just try to tell you a condensed version. So that was 2020. I trained and swam on my own until early 2021. And then I'm like, I think I need a coach. I need somebody to tell me how to ramp up the volume safely without hurting myself and then taper for the swim. So the swim happened August of 2021. And at that time, I had been working with a coach just about 12 weeks leading into the swim. And he told me, all these long swims that I had to do. And I did them. I did the swims. I did about half the distance. So I swam 26 kilometers. That was my last long training swim. And then I took a taper like 2-3 weeks where I did very little. I let my body rest before I attempted the lake swim.
And that is a very short amount of time. I'm not a swimmer and I'm not a competitive runner or anything like that, but my husband loves running and does races all the time. And thinking about how long he trained for his marathon and things like that, that seems like a very short amount of time for you to be jumping in Lake Ontario and accomplishing this.
It kind of was,
Yeah.
because the coach that I had hired, he said, like, what kind of long swims have you done? I said, oh, I swam 5K once. And he was kind of like,
Uh-oh.
are you sure you can do this? Like, how do you know you're going to even like swimming for that long?
Right.
But I quickly proved to him that he said, well, you need to start doing longer swims. So I had been swimming a lot of volume in the week, but they were like short swims. He's like, you need to go out. He's like, tomorrow you need to go swim 10K. So I did. And then the next question was like, okay, you need to go swim 10K 2 days in a row. And I'm like, okay. So I went and did that. And I think I gained his confidence, that, okay, I think she's willing to put in the work and she's willing to do this.
Oh.
Um, so yeah, the whole training was like a little over a year, but like the ramp up to do it was maybe too short. But we laugh because I have the same coach still now for another swim that I'm training for. And he's laughing. He's like, this is a joke. He's like, I know you're going to be able to do this because you trained to swim Lake Ontario in like 12 weeks.
Remarkable. And how long did it take you from the moment you stepped into the water until you stepped out of the water?
It was 18 hours and 35 minutes.
Remarkable.
Hmm.
Wow. And as you were swimming, I don't think I've ever done anything for 18 hours, including sleep, which is really easy, right? How did you keep that mental fortitude up that entire time?
I think knowing that I had a cause, there was a reason outside of myself that I was doing it for. I was raising funds for the transplant program that saved my life, where my mom and I both had our transplants. So I was raising money. I also knew that people were watching. And for some people, that's too much pressure to do something. Like they don't want to, sometimes people do big things, they don't want to tell anyone because they don't like that pressure of people are expecting something of me. For me, that encouraged me and made me stick to the plan even more. Like I knew that I had an impact on other transplant recipients that were watching, and I wanted them to see what was possible after having a transplant, and that kept me going. The other thing was just like you spend a lot of like when you're swimming, you're in your head a lot. You can't really talk to anybody. So
No.
luckily I had a decent relationship with myself, and I could keep things fairly positive in my head and in my thoughts. But a lot of it was like mind games, like counting strokes and just playing with the time. I didn't know what time it was, but I knew that every time I'd stop was 40 minutes. And that was just treading water. They'd throw me a bottle of fluid or food because I wasn't allowed to touch the boat. So they would
Right.
throw it to me attached to a rope or hand it to me in a lacrosse stick is what we use.
Very Canadian.
Yeah, that was how I got my nutrition. So I knew every 40 minutes. So I would count my strokes for 40 minutes, and then the next 40 minutes I would see if it was the same amount of strokes. Like it just stupid mind games that keep you occupied. And then once the sun came up, I could see my crew. Like I could see my husband on
Right.
the boat and my
Oh,
friend that was driving the boat. And so like looking at them every time I'd like turn to take a breath was something else to keep me entertained. Um,
wow. Incredible. And what did it feel like when those feet hit the bottom and you knew you could stand up and you'd completed that swim?
So I have to giggle because I had I had to climb out of a ladder to finish my swim.
Oh,
There was no sandy bottom that I it was not like a beach where you walk up onto it. It was
right.
like I swam into like a break wall in the Toronto harbor front,
Wow.
and I finished in Maryland Bell Park. And so there's like I think it's a brick wall there. And so I had to like swim and touch the wall. And then they put this emergency ladder down into the water. And then I had to climb out the
Oh
ladder
my
to
goodness.
finish my swim.
So you've
So
just swam 18 hours and now we're going to make you climb up this wall.
yeah, yeah, I
Oh my
know.
goodness.
It's, it's kind of funny. But the moment when I touched the wall was, oh wow. Um, I've described it before, like it felt like I went to outer space. Like I went somewhere that I never thought I'd see, never could imagine what it would be like. And then I like landed back on Earth and I was just like, wow, like I actually did it. And it was just putting in the time. And I was amazed, I amazed myself that I put in the time to do that. And I was very proud of myself, seeing my family and friends, and there was a bit of a crowd at the finish. It was very overwhelming. I felt, I don't know, I felt important. I felt like I had done something that not a lot of people had done, which is the truth. Um, and I was elated that it was done because it was hard. It
Yeah. Wow.
was really hard.
Congratulations. That's amazing. I think, all of us transplant patients who are listening right now and know your story or hear your story are so proud of you and happy for you. And also, I say it all the time, it's a family that we don't want new members in. But once you're
Yeah.
part of the transplant family, we really do stick together and root for each other. And
Mm.
it's so empowering. Again, I've said that, but also so brave of you and remarkable to be that voice of a community and to show the world that just because we've been through something really hard doesn't mean we can't continue to do hard things, and show the world that there's a lot left in us to give and a lot
Mhm.
to prove to that world. So thank you for
Yeah.
showing that to everyone and being such a strength for all of us to look up to.
Oh, thank you. Uh, yeah, it's an honor. And if I can even say, just because we've been through a transplant, I think that gives us more strength because we've come through it. And I would hope that people that have had a transplant don't forget that. It doesn't make you weaker. At least that's how I view it. It doesn't make you a weaker person. I think it makes us stronger. So um, I think hopefully that would encourage anyone who's listening.
Incredible. I'm wondering if you have any advice for people. So, maybe those people who are newly diagnosed or who are in the thick of things right now, or even advice for those of us who are post transplant.
For anybody waiting, um, one moment at a time really is all we can, is all we have, is all we can manage, and try not to think too far ahead into what could happen and what's going to happen, and try to stay as positive as you can and surround yourself with only positive people, because there's no room in your life for people that aren't going to help lift you up and support you. And for anyone who's had a transplant, I would encourage them to set a goal, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be an athletic goal, but I think having something positive that you can work on and work towards and improve, that's been something that's really kept me moving forward and keeps my mental health in a good place. And sometimes it's just small goals, like I'm going to read for 20 minutes today, or it could be a bigger goal, like I want to go to the World Transplant Games. um, that's a great goal. I do think it's a life-changing experience, and you get to see the world and meet other people. Um, but overall, yeah, surround yourself with positivity. I think that's so important.
And what's next for you? What's your next goal?
So my next goal is this summer,
Mm-hmm.
July the 27th, I am swimming 30 kilometers across Lake Muskoka.
Amazing.
I'm starting in Gravenhurst and I'm going to finish in Port Carling. And this year, the funds that we're going to raise are going to support kids that are going to, it's called Camp Kavita.
Mm-hmm.
It's a camp based out of the Muskokas. And this camp supports and provides a safe place for kids that have had a transplant or are waiting for a transplant to have a week at camp with all the support that they need medically so they can have like a normal camp experience like any other kid.
I love
So
that.
yeah, I'm feel really good about the cause, and I hope to visit the camp later in the summer and meet some of the kids that get to go to the camp. So
Beautiful.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your remarkable journey and such good advice
Pleasure.
for all of us transplant recipients. It's truly a beautiful journey you've had and continue to have. And I think all of us will definitely be watching. And thank you so much, Jillian.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So now it's my pleasure to have Dr. Faughnan join us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to be able to do this. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm a doctor. I'm a respirologist, in other words, a lung specialist by training and a researcher by training too. And as I was doing my training and becoming a respirologist and a researcher, I became very interested in a rare disease, hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. And HHT very rapidly became my passion. I wanted to look after people with HHT, and my mentor and I set up a center for people with HHT, and from there I've never really looked back. I mean, that really is my primary focus at work, and I do some general respirology as well. But HHT is my clinical focus and my research focus.
Beautiful. And for people who have never heard of HHT, can you tell us a little bit about it and how it affects people?
Yeah, so HHT is an inherited disease. So it's inherited through the genes, and it's a dominant genetic disease. So it means that, often when we diagnose someone, half of their family has the disease. And most people that inherit it will have symptoms of the disease, but the symptoms can be really quite variable. So what HHT does, it basically makes people at risk of developing abnormal blood vessels. And and unfortunately, there are a lot of difficult terms in HHT, a lot of sort of tongue twisters. But the small abnormal vessels are called telangiectasia, and the larger ones are called arteriovenous malformations, or AVMs. And they can occur, these abnormal blood vessels, in different parts of the body and cause different kinds of symptoms depending on where they occur. So most commonly, almost everyone with HHT, at least by the time they're sort of middle adult life, will have nosebleeds from telangiectasia in their nose. And that often really affects people's quality of life. Like, it sounds kind of minor maybe to other people, but for people with HHT, it can be, there's a full range of how much it can affect them. But then people with HHT can also have larger abnormal vessels in the organs, and like in the lungs or in the brain or in the liver, sometimes telangiectasia in the liver and in the stomach and bowels. So a lot of different types of symptoms depending on what part of the body gets affected. And not every person with HHT has the same, has it affect the same parts of their body. So it's a disease that can cause a lot of problems and can cause, and you've heard about some of those problems already. Thankfully, there is treatment for some aspects of HHT, and that's kind of how we started out, because we realized, okay, there are some people that had, for example, AVMs in their lungs that could get treated preventatively and didn't have to have complications. But for a long time, that was the only really good treatment that we had. And now in recent years, we're starting to have more and more treatments for other aspects of HHT. So there's a lot of hope, a lot we can do for HHT.
This is such a rare disease. How did you discover this specialty and how did you get to that place? When you were a child, did you always think I'm going to be a doctor at some time and then find this specialty throughout your teaching, or how did you get here?
Yeah, it's a good question. You're right. For a long time, I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I had no idea going into medical school what kind of doctor I'd want to be.
Hmm.
And even into residency, I was still unsure. In medicine, there's sort of 100 different careers
Right.
in one, and so
Yeah.
it for most of us in medicine, part of there's sort of a path of sort of figuring out what's the right fit. Where do you feel like you can where do you feel like you can do your best work,
Hmm.
and I think that I initially found that in respirology, and then when I was training in respirology and met I met a couple of patients. I saw a couple of patients with HHT and with lung AVMs because I was in respirology.
Right.
And both of these patients had HHT, but the current thinking was, well, if they're not getting worse or they're not growing, or then you just keep an eye on them. There was sort of a,
Wait and see.
there was
kind of.
not a very, wait
Yeah.
and see approach. And yet both of these people during that wait and see approach, they developed serious complications of the lung AVMs.
Wow.
And so I was seeing them after this and
Right.
sort of saying, wow, and learning that, wow, we could have prevented that,
Mhm.
or someone could have prevented that if they'd known, because there was this new embolization treatment, new at that time, which is a way of blocking off these AVMs. And so it was just, it was a really kind of lucky for me that I met these patients and that I understood that there was something that I could do that could, maybe I could bring together people, or maybe I could learn more about this disease, and that we could maybe really prevent these terrible complications from happening to people. And the more I looked into it and the more people I talked to, like sort of experts in the disease, the more I realized that there was a lot that we could do, a lot that we could offer to patients and their families.
That's
And
fascinating.
and it just felt really rewarding right from the first day, and when you meet someone with a rare disease and you say, I know what you have, and I understand what needs to be done, you're often greeted by this incredible sort of sense of their incredible relief. Oh, finally someone who understands my disease and who doesn't just say, oh, I've heard about this, that's really rare, I'm not sure what that is, but someone who's going to I can feel safe here and someone's going to look after me. And that felt really, that really impacted me to hear that from my patients.
And can you talk a little bit about that Cure HHT that you're the scientific director for?
Within a couple of years of starting my career, I was asked to be a board member for Cure HHT, which was then called the HHT Foundation. This was the International HHT Foundation. And it was really exciting to work with patients. I mean, it was a whole patient board, but I was asked to be on the scientific and medical advisory board. And within about 5 years, I became the chair of that scientific and medical advisory board, and did some really interesting work and worked, I would say, an amazing scientific and medical advisory board, but an even more amazing patient board that really, and for me, that experience has been like career changing and life changing to work so closely with patients. And Cure HHT has grown and grown and grown, and I'm not their scientific director anymore, but I'm very engaged and very involved, and it's important, I think, that they and we have brought in a lot more clinicians and scientists to the cause, and we have new leaders who are really taking big steps forward. There's a group in Canada that started an advocacy group too called HHT Canada. That's a group of patients that are working hard to try and also work locally to improve the care for people with HHT. So I've had the lovely opportunity of working with them as well.
That's amazing. So not only are you a physician and you do all of this remarkable work, but you're also a living liver donor.
Now that's been an amazing experience.
That's incredible. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
The process really started, or the my thinking about it started when a colleague of mine needed a donor. And in fact, he's a colleague and his wife is also a colleague. And she kind of wrote to and she's a respirologist like me. So I know her really well and I know him pretty well. He's a urologist who works at our hospital. And it's okay for me to talk about him. We've kind of agreed about these things. So his wife had reached out, had sort of taken on the role of trying to help him find a donor. She had reached out to all of our colleagues with a sort of a letter that came through our department chair, sort of just telling what was going on with Rob, and that, and sort of saying that this is where he was at, and that he needed a liver donor, and that they were going through the process of reaching out, looking for a liver donor. And we're a very close group of colleagues, and we were talking about, and all of us know them, and everyone was just like, this is feeling terrible about what was happening with Rob, and talking about the fact that, somebody needs to donate a liver to Rob. I mean, we need, he needs this, and who is that going to be, and how is that going to happen? And from that moment, I mean, I was part of this conversation and asking questions, and I think we were all feeling the same way. But this question started forming in my head. It's like, someone needs to give Rob, let's donate their liver to Rob, and why isn't that me? And so I asked, I remember we were at our division meeting, and I asked, I said, well, what's it like being a liver donor?
Mm-hmm.
I asked another bunch of respirologists, and most of them didn't really know.
Right.
But people said, oh, had some ideas, but I kind of, worked with those ideas those answers for a while, but it was pretty vague. Like, nobody really knew how long of a recovery it was, or how risky it was, or that sort of thing. And I do my best thinking when I'm riding on my bike, and it seemed like for the weeks after that, I just kept thinking, I'd be riding along and I'd be thinking, well, why isn't it me? And then I would go through this list of reasons, and then slowly I would cross them off, like one after the other off the list, and then I was like, okay, well, the question's still running. So one day I decided to actually get I was lucky, I could actually reach out to someone who knows a lot about this. And I don't know why I didn't think about it before. I think I just needed time to process it, but I reached out, I messaged a friend of mine who's one of my cycling friends, and he's a liver transplant surgeon.
Oh, wow.
And so, like I said,
Helpful.
I had some pretty easy contacts I should have thought of sooner. But I reached out to him and I said, what's it like being a donor? And he said, well, why don't we meet for a coffee and I'll tell you about it. So we met for a coffee, and he told me all about it. And then I told him why I was thinking of it. And I said, from what you said, sounds doable. It doesn't sound like a crazy idea. And from there, it was kind of, it was a matter of what's the process now? But what I had heard from him is very, they've done a lot of living donor transplants in Toronto and elsewhere too, but Toronto's a really big experience program. And I, he went through the explanations of it to me, what it was like, what the risks were. And it sounded, honestly, it's quite low risk. That was probably the turning point for me, was hearing the real information about it.
A lot of them that I hear from at the center are where you are, right? In that like investigative place, but they keep having that nagging feeling in their head, like, why couldn't it be me? Why couldn't I do this? Having those very clearly laid out facts about our success rates at Toronto General and how many liver transplants have happened, and the crazy thing about the liver regenerating and growing back to its size, and all of these remarkable things that can happen. And often after a session, when we have living donor sessions, I'll have a donor that will say, thank you, I feel good. I've gotten the information and the stats and the cold hard facts that I need, because the emotional side was there. I just needed to know how safe I was going to be throughout this process, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I was so happy the day that I heard that I was actually a good match, that I was a good candidate to be Rob's donor. So that was a very that was very happy news when I found that out,
Wow.
because you don't know when you go into it, you know,
Right.
and so I didn't tell anybody until
Oh, you
other than
didn't.
I didn't tell anyone when I started it.
Wow.
Um, once once I got to the point that I had that I knew that that I was a good candidate, then I talked to people, because I guess I was, you know, I didn't want to be like, it wasn't to me about having other people recognizing that I was doing this. I actually just wanted to do it. And so my focus was more on, can I do this? And is it reasonably safe for me? And can I do it without being a huge burden on other people? And so I didn't want to make it, I didn't want to burden people more than necessary, even ahead of ahead of knowing. And I just, you know, I just kind of thought, well, it's not a real thing until I know it's a real thing, you know?
Incredible. And at what point did you tell your recipient? Did you tell Rob and his family that you were his donor?
You're right. Like, they didn't know that I was doing this. They knew somebody was in the process, because there's always only, I guess, one person at a time. So the recipient knows, or potential, you know, the person who's listed, or Rob, let's be more personal, knew that someone was getting tested. And I guess a number of people had gotten tested already and had not been suitable donors for him. So he knew that someone was being tested. And when I heard that I was, you know, a good candidate, that I could do this, they said, how do you want to handle it? Like, because they can keep it confidential. And I said, well, I think it's better if you just tell them that it's me. And that, you know, and to me, it seemed better that it not be a secret. Like, it's a funny thing about, especially in medicine and amongst doctors, is there kind of aren't really any secrets. Like, I thought I'd way rather just have this be like out in the open than have everybody going, you know, like, it just seemed like there was no, you know, it's funny. I've always been a really private person, but at that point I was kind of like, you know what, it doesn't make sense to keep this a secret. But that, you know, first they needed to know, and then the rest kind of unfolded from there. So they told him soon after, and then he reached out to me, and we had our first conversation about it.
Wow. And that must have been quite the powerful conversation between the two of you when he found out that this was going to happen.
It wasn't, I wasn't ready for it, because I had been so wrapped up in is this a crazy idea, or is this something, you know, that was kind of, you know, it'd been all about me in my head making a decision. I hadn't really thought about what his reaction, I mean, it sounds dumb that I hadn't thought about that,
No,
but it
not
really
at all.
wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then when he texted me, can I call you later? I was like, okay, but not right away, like maybe a little later. Like, I just was like, what am I, like, that suddenly felt like a very scary, just a really intense conversation, you know? But of course it was lovely. And it was just, I just hadn't crossed that threshold yet of thinking about what his reaction was going to be, or other people's.
Yeah,
like,
right.
you know, it really, so it was a bit overwhelming. Like, in a lovely, lovely way, but it was a bit emotionally overwhelming to talk to him and to talk to his wife Marg about it.
Yeah, I bet. And how is Rob doing?
He's great.
Yeah.
He's you know, it's been 5 years now.
Wow.
Almost exactly 5 years. And I can't remember exactly how long until he was back at work, but maybe about, because he was off work before had been for about a year, I think, before the transplant, and then maybe about a year before he started progressively coming back to work. And then he was back to operating, and then he's back to transplanting kidneys. So that felt really special to me too. I was like, wow, that's pretty neat. Like, that, you know, not that he's continuing to do that that really impactful job. So he feels great, and he's really happy. So that makes me happy.
And yes, you not only gave that gift of life to Rob and his family, but I always say with living donors, then they're taking a recipient off of the wait list. So there's that person who also is able to get a transplant sooner, because there's one less person waiting. And then because of Rob's work, now he is able to impact all of these other people because of the gift that you gave. And so it's this, you said, a tsunami of emotions, but now it's this huge impact of what that one gift has done for the world. It's amazing.
Best decision I ever made.
Now, you joined us for our Great Actions Leave a Mark campaign. And for that campaign, we asked people to bring something with them that was significant to their transplant journey. And we haven't released all of the footage of those items, but we had people who brought letters, who brought thank you cards, who brought teddy bears. I brought one of my dialysis clips, and everybody, it was really neat seeing what people brought in. And you brought your bike.
I brought my bike. I managed to get it into the building.
Amazing. And so how long after the surgery were you back on that bike?
It was supposed to be 6 weeks, but it was actually 4. It was, but my friend, the liver transplant surgeon, came with me on that ride, and he's like, I'm going to make sure you're safe.
Amazing.
But yeah, I was back on the bike after a month, and kind of slowly recovering after that. And like Jillian talked about, this was, my goal. I needed a goal, and it was, and for me, my goal was to compete in, or to participate is more the right word, in this long gravel ride in September. So I donated in May, and this was 4 months later. And it was a 200-kilometer gravel ride. There's a fundraiser for Parkinson's, actually. It's called the Growling Beaver. And I had a bunch of friends who were doing this, and people had decided to do the long distance, the 200, and I had wanted to do that too. I had never actually cycled that far before, though lots of, hundreds and that kind of thing, lots of other cycling. So I had to get back on the bike because I was like, I've got this, in 4 months, I need to be able to do 200K.
Incredible.
And I get so much happiness from cycling with them that all of that was my inspiration to get well again, to fully recover. And I really felt that I did.
Incredible. Wow. Yeah, amazing. Hearing from both of you today what sport means to you it's so impactful. And I'm wondering if you had to speak to the public about living donations. We've done our Great Actions campaign, and we asked you many of these questions, but if there was somebody out there who was maybe considering becoming a donor, or if there's a recipient out there who's really nervous about somebody who they love becoming their donor, what would you say to them?
I would say, what, it's an amazing experience for a donor. And obviously I'm speaking from my experience, and I, as I've said before, I came at this in, from a privileged position of being a doctor, and also being really healthy, and having a lot of people to support me. But I want people to know that it's an amazing experience, and that it's not that hard. It was, there was a surgery and there was a recovery, but it was doable, and it wasn't scary, and I recovered well, and I feel 100%. And I realize that will not be the case for everyone, but I think for most people it is. And I want to shout that out so people know. and that other people maybe who are in a position like me that they could donate, that maybe that it'll be a little less scary to them.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm wondering, Jillian, bringing you back, if there's anything that you wanted to ask Marie, or if there's anything that you heard of us chatting that you wanted to comment on.
As I'm sitting here listening, it's very interesting to hear the perspective of a potential donor, and like the questions that you're considering. Can this be me? I find that very kind of interesting from my side of things, to hear what's important going into making that decision. But I just feel, I don't know how to say it. I just feel like I want to give you a big hug. I just think it's wonderful that you've become a donor and have had that experience. And I can't help but think it probably helps your work in some way. I could never begin to imagine how. I also wanted to say, like, thank you for talking about it amongst your colleagues and other people, because I think that's important for organ donation and just spreading the awareness too, and saying that it was a positive experience for you. Hopefully that encourages other people.
Thanks. It feels really important to me too, because I feel like when I was thinking about it, I knew so few people that could answer my questions. Like, I actually did have some colleagues, but I knew nobody personally, and so it felt like an outrageous idea, but it wasn't outrageous in the end.
No, not at all.
There's the title of the episode. It's not outrageous. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Faughnan. We are so grateful to have you on the podcast today, and for all of the amazing work that you do in advocacy for patients, and also for being a donor yourself and spreading this awareness. It's amazing to get to talk to you today, and thank you so much for your time and all that you do.
Well, thank you. And thank you both for inspiring me. Really amazing talking to both of you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Living Transplant podcast. If you did, please leave us a review and share with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to Living Transplant wherever you are listening today. If you have any ideas for podcast episodes, you can reach out to us at livingorgandonation@uhn.ca or on social at GiveLifeUHN. For more information about living organ donation, you can visit us at www.livingorgandonation.ca. Special thanks to Lead Podcasting for editing this episode and for production support. I'm your host, Candice Coghlan. Thanks for spending your time with us.